and the one that you will give today will also have a deadline of a week or so.
Yeah, so like the second assignment you have to submit by 7th of February.
Yes, sir.
Last is 30th of January. And the
Yes,
third
sir.
assignment which I will post today, I will give you maybe another 8 days. So it's mid-February would be deadline approximately. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Animesh, please start.
Yes, sir. I have shared my screen. Is it visible to you all?
Thank you. Yeah, I can see
Yes, sir.
your screen. Yeah.
So whenever I'm finished with this tutorial, we can end the session, right, sir?
Yes, you can. So you and Asmita is also going to present, or you
No,
alone?
no. Today I'm going to present only. Asmita will present in the next lab.
Okay, all right. I think yeah. Then once you are done, you can basically stop the session and then they can students can leave. Okay.
Okay, okay, sir.
Mhm.
So today we are having a tutorial on TensorFlow basics and how we build a deep neural network model, architecture model using TensorFlow and Keras. So let's start. So basically, what is TensorFlow? I mean, any one of you have any prior idea about this TensorFlow and Keras?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. So basically, TensorFlow is a framework which was designed by the Google team. And in order to implement the machine learning and deep learning models in a very easier way. So when I'll be going through the TensorFlow basics, you might notice that it is it has the operations very similar to the NumPy. And because I mean, the NumPy is the Python library which was initially built for the all kind of mathematical operations and manipulation, performing the manipulation in the data. But TensorFlow is specifically built to deal with the deep learning and machine learning concepts. And one of the most important improvement in the TensorFlow is that it automatically performs the gradient functions. So it automatically performs the differentiations or the derivatives, etc. So that is where it becomes most useful in the in terms of deep learning or machine learning. And in order to do that in using NumPy, you need to build your explicit functions or you need to use explicit libraries to do that. But in the TensorFlow, it's inbuilt. So the TensorFlow, as the word suggests, tensor is basically a multi-dimensional array, and these are some important features of TensorFlow. And let us go one by one. So it includes features that defines and optimize and calculate mathematical expressions easily, and with the help of multi-dimensional array. And as I told that those are multi-dimensional arrays are known as tensors. So it includes programming support for deep learning and the machine learning. And TensorFlow basically also uses GPU computing. So it depends what kind of system you are using. If you have enabled the GPU, so it will use GPU for the computation, or it will simply use the CPU for the computation. And these are some important features of TensorFlow, which I have took from the TensorFlow website itself. So if you haven't installed, if you are using your local systems, then you can install TensorFlow by simply putting this. Install TensorFlow and it will install in your local systems. And if you are using Google Colab, then simply you can import TensorFlow. So we'll start by importing. Let me just reset all the cells. So now we'll start importing TensorFlow as TF, and the Keras is the high-level API which is used over the TensorFlow, and it's a part of TensorFlow framework itself. So we'll import Keras from the TensorFlow like this. And when you hit the run, this will simply import the TensorFlow into your system and the Keras also. So first, what we are going to do, we are simply going to initialize a tensor which with a only one value, that is a constant value, which is not having any dimension. So it will simply simple do tf dot constant. So this is the method by which we basically initiate any tensor of any kind of shape. So tf dot constant 4, it will simply create a tensor of 4. And because it's a simple constant, it is not having any shape, and simply you can do it for the float value also. And by default, it considers the data type of integer 32. And suppose if you wanted to convert it into a shape of 1 by 1, and you also wanted to convert the data type of in that into a float, so what we need to do, we can define this shape as 1 by 1 and pass the data type also in the same cell itself. So let me run this, and you can see that now this 4, which is an integer value, it's converted into a float type value, and the shape of it has also been changed to 1 by 1. Now simply we can do it for the multi-dimension also. Suppose I am doing it for the 2 rows and 3 column. So I can define it like that. And when I'll run this, so it will show you the shape also, like it's a 2 by 3 kind of matrix kind of a structure. And yeah, and if you wanted to change the shape also, you can simply define the shape here itself. And if you wanted to change the data type, you can define the D type also. TF dot D2. So it will simply convert all the integer values into the float values. And as you have seen in the tutorial of NumPy also, you can simply generate the you can simply populate the 3 by 3 or whatever size you are defining in the architecture itself. So in the NumPy, you have seen you were using np.1s to populate the matrix with the value 1. So in the similar in the TensorFlow, you can also do that using tf.1s. It will simply create a 3 by 3 matrix of values 1, and by default it considers the float 32. And simply for the zeros also. And this is the defined shape in which we want to generate the data. And if you wanted to create an identity matrix, so you just simply put the size of the identity matrix, and it will simply produce the identity matrix like that. And with the similar fashion as NumPy, you can here also generate the random values also using tf.random.normal. And here you can also define the mean and standard deviation. I mean, you want to generate the values between the mean 0 and the standard deviation of 1, and simply it will generate the values in the asked similar fashion. And in this, I am generating the random values in the uniform distribution. So it will simply generate the values in the uniformly distributed manner. And I'm asking in the size of 1 cross 3. So simply take that as input. And if you wanted to create generate the numbers using a range function. So that range function can also be used in the TensorFlow also using a tf.range. And here you define like to what limit you wanted to generate the number. So it will simply start from 0 by default, and it will go up to the defined number, but not including. Now simply in the range function, you can pass the arguments like from where in the index you wanted to start, and what is the last index up to which you wanted to go, and what is the step size. So these are the arguments which are passed in this fashion: start, limit, and delta. So it basically starts from 1 and it will go up to 10, but not including, and in the step size of 2. So 1, and because we have given it the step size of 2, so it will consider 3, 5, 7, 9, so on. So now let's see about some of the mathematical operations associated with this TensorFlow. So for that, we are simply just creating two tensors, x and y, of 1 cross 3, and we can simply perform the addition operation using simple mathematical signs, plus minus for subtraction, multiplication for that you can simply use that, and division, and this is for the power of that. So what will be the output of print? So you can see that simply it's producing 2 to the power 5 and 3 to the power 5 and 1 to the power 5. And if you wanted to take the dot
What
product,
does
yeah,
what does dividing a two vector do?
yeah, let's print that also. It will simply divide both, I mean the values in the both the tensors. Simply all the values of x, I mean the indexed wise values are divided. 1 will be divided by 4, 2 will be divided by 5, and 3 will be divided by 6.
What if the dimensions are different for x and y? Like here there are this is 1 into 3, 1 into 3 now.
Yeah.
So if it is 1 into 3 and 1 into 4, what will the output of Z mul?
So basically what happens if whenever you are having the different size of tensors, then that TensorFlow simply performs the broadcasting type of operation, and we will come into that in the later part of this tutorial. So that part is associated with the kind of broadcasting operations.
Okay.
Yeah. So any doubt till now?
The broadcasting feature is also available in NumPy.
Yeah. That is also in the NumPy also. Yeah. I
Sir,
mean,
here every data structure is only a tensor, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when you are outputting the constant, means it is not 1 cross 1, but it is means what is its dimension?
I mean, if you are simply putting one value as an integer, then it is not considering as I mean, it is considering at that value only, not in the tensor form. So if you wanted to produce a tensor, then you need to define in these square brackets only. Then it will consider it as tensor. So if you will simply put one value in a square bracket, then it will consider it as 1 cross 1 tensor. And simply one value if you will put, then it will take it as value.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So I was here. So the next operation is the dot product. So if you wanted to take the dot product of these two tensors x and y, you can simply use tf dot tensor dot, and you can pass the arguments, I mean the vectors as an argument, and the axis is equals to 1. So simply it will take the dot product.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can we pass a NumPy array to tensor and reshape it?
Yeah, we'll come to that also. I mean, we are having all those things in this.
Sir, axis is the dot product.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Axis equal to 1 in dot product.
So if we put the axis is equals to 0, so it will simply do the dot product, like it will consider it in, it will take this x tensor, and basically it will perform the broadcasting type of operation. So it will do it in horizontal manner. The 4 will be multiplied by with all these values, and it will put at this tensor, and the 5 again in the same way. This is stacked into the horizontal manner. So that is the only part of. If you want it into the vertical, so if you will put the axis as 1, so it will simply take the dot products 4, 5 to the 10, 6 3 is 18, and it will I mean add all those values, and it will simply give you the dot product. So basically it basically depends on the what kind of size of matrix you have. So it will be more clear, and I would recommend you to do this kind of operation by defining the matrices of larger sizes. For example, you define the matrix of 3 cross 3 or 5 cross 5, both the tensors x and y, and then perform this kind of operation. Then it will become more clear to you. So now what I'm doing, I am again generating two tensors, x2 and y2, and now this time I'm populating with those with the random normal values of 2 cross 3 and 3 cross 4. And this time I am doing the matrix multiplication operation. So matrix multiplication operation is simply can be done by these two methods. If you use an @ symbol between those two tensors, so it will simply perform the matrix multiplication, or you can simply use tf.matmul, and you can pass the vectors as an argument. So it will perform the matrix multiplication operation. So let's see what is the output.
Can
Yeah.
we use @ for higher dimensional tensors also?
Yeah, you can use the @ for the higher dimensional tensors also, but you need to remember one thing, that how does the matrix multiplication work. I mean, you need to keep the consideration of the dimensions itself. For example, you must be knowing that if you are doing the matrix multiplication, if you are considering a matrix of 2 cross 3 and you are doing matrix multiplication, then next matrix should be of 3 cross something size, so that it can be multiplied. This thing you need to remember. So this is the, so what is the, if you are multiplying two matrix, one is the size of 2 cross 3 and another is the size of 3 cross 4, then the output size will be 2 cross 4. I mean, this is the simple matrix multiplication which all you have done in the linear algebra. So moving forward, we can perform the indexing operations also, just similar to you have performed these operations in the NumPy also, or in the list kind of data structure also in the Python. So I would ask you, some basic outputs, so that you guys are clear with the fundamentals. Okay, let me just print that. So this is I am defining again a tensor of populating with the range function, and I am defining it as x3. So what will be the output if I'll do this operation?
It will print all values.
Yeah, it will print all the values. And what will be the output of this?
From 2 to the last. From index 2, it will
Second row.
No, it's not, for because the dimension of the tensor is
8 cross 1.
Yeah. So basically, what this is doing, can you explain what is this argument, what we are passing, what the value is considering it? What value this argument is? Yeah, it will. Yeah, basically it will start from the index. That is what I just wanted to know, that it will start not from the value 2, but from the index 2. And it will go up to last index. Similarly, what will happen in this?
Yeah, it will go until 4.
It will print all the elements up to index 4.
Yeah, it will print all the elements up to index 4. And yeah, similarly, what will happen in this?
So all elements should be printed, but the increment will
0
be
to 4, like that.
Yeah, 0 to 4, because it will traverse through all the elements and in the step size of 2. So it will consider only every second element. And if we are using -1 in place of 2, then what it will do?
In reverse order.
It will print in reverse order.
And if we use -2 here?
Step size of 2, the reverse order.
Yeah, in the reverse order, it will consider the step size as -2. So these are all the outputs. So this is for the indices. So I'm defining the indices to I mean for the specific task like tf dot constant, and this is the tensor 0 cross 3, and what I want to use the gather tf dot gather, and I want to gather the specific indices. So it will in the deep learning model you will not be using these functions very much, but it's just for the basic understanding of it. And this is these might be some important where we perform some kind of manipulations, or this is the for the slicing operation. Let's suppose you have this tensor x4. So what will happen in this? I mean, what it will slice, from where it will start, and what will happen after the comma and before the comma. Can anyone please explain?
It will print the first row, I guess. All columns in the first row.
Yeah, it will print the first. Basically, before comma, it considers it is specified for the value of rows. I mean, whatever number of rows we are expecting, and after the comma, it is for the columns. And what will happen in this?
It will print the first two rows.
3, 4 is printed.
1, 2, and 3, 4.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3, 4. It will go in the row from index 0 to index 1. Index 0 row, index 1 row, 1, 2, 3, 4. And because we are passing, we are considering all the columns. So let's talk about reshaping also. Okay, let me print it here. So this is our x5 tensor, again populated within a random range, not random, within a range of 0 to 8. So what will happen if we want to reshape the tensor? We can simply use tensor dot reshape, and we can pass as an argument. First argument should be the tensor to which we wanted to reshape, and next should be the size in which we wanted to reshape. So it will simply reshape the tensor into 3 cross 3, and to take the transpose, simply take tf dot transpose. So I mean, these are all the basics of TensorFlow, and these, as you have guys already noticed, that these are very similar to the NumPy.
Sir, can you please explain the argument of the second argument of transpose?
Yeah, basically, what is simply doing, it is taking the transpose in, this 0, 1, 2. And this is the first row. The row is converted into the column form: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Normally when we take the transpose, we take the transpose in this form. We consider the column 0, 3, 6, and simply, this is the same thing only.
Sir, what does PERM signify?
Okay, let's see. Basically, it is associated with the parameters only. So basically, if PRM is not given, it is set to, it will consider all the rows when n is the rank of the input tensor. It's basically associated with the rank of the tensor only. If you are having any doubt, simply you can go to this kind of documentation. You will get to know all the things. So let's see what will happen if we do not pass this. It again doing the same thing. So the PRM is basically used when we are having, you know, the multi-dimensional, like when we are having the shape of matrix like 3 cross 4 cross 5, we are having the 3 tensors and all the tensors of the size 4 cross 5. If we are having this kind of architecture, and in that kind of architecture, if we are using transpose, then the parameter which I passed becomes important in this kind of architecture. Let me show you. If we are passing this kind of architecture, I mean, this is the kind of architecture in which we have 3 tensors, and all those are the size of 2 cross 5, 2 rows 5 columns, and these are stacked in this fashion. So when we are performing the transpose in this kind of tensors, then the parameter becomes important. So I'll just share this in the chat. I mean, this is an official TensorFlow documentation, and for the better visual understanding, you guys can go through that also. It will basically shows in a very intuitive manner, like how the tensors are stored and how they physically looks like. So if you are having a tensor of shape 3 cross 2 cross 4 cross 5, then it will be stored like this. So in the axis 0, that is the horizontal axis, we will be having 3 tensors and of a size 2 cross 4, but all the tensors will be having the 5 features. I mean, the same 2 cross 4, 5 tensors will be stacked one after another, and they will be stacked in this fashion. So the size will become 3 cross 2 cross 4 cross 5. And how many will be the number of parameters? Can anyone tell in this?
4.
No, the total number of, I mean, parameters in this.
120.
120.
Simply the multiplication of that. Yeah. So now let's move ahead and create a feed forward neural network architecture. So for that, we simply we are importing this Keras from TensorFlow, and from the Keras we are importing layers, and I'll explain why we are importing layers, and we will define this neural network architecture into the MNIST dataset, and let me show you how this MNIST dataset look like. So this is how our MNIST dataset looks like. Every image of pixel 28 cross 28, and every image also has an associated label with that also. So I mean, while defining the neural network architecture using this TensorFlow and Keras, there are two things to remember, that we can define the architecture in two ways, and both the ways have their different significance. We can define in a sequential manner also, and we can define in the functional manner also. So what is the basic difference between sequential and functional? Basically, in the sequential, as the name suggests, we are stacking the layers in the neural network, and it will accept every layer as one element. And suppose if we wanted to go backward from one layer to another layer, that will not be possible in the sequential, but it will be possible for the if we are defining the model using the functional. So today we will be discussing about this sequential kind of architecture, because if we are using the functional API to define a neural network architecture, that is basically used for the more complex kind of neural network. And today we will be learning like how to define a deep neural network architecture in a simpler form. So let's import the data from the MNIST.load data. So it will import the data set, and we are having in the training data set, we are having 60,000 images of pixels 28 cross 28. So let's just reshape them to when we are passing the image as an input, then we must reshape them, or I must say that we must flatten them. And what we are doing, because the image has pixels values between 0 to 255, so we are normalizing it between 0 and 1. So now if we are defining
so what does flattening mean?
Okay, I mean, is it not covered in the class?
No.
Okay. So let me show you like in a very intuitive manner. So all you guys also can follow this tutorial. 3 blue 1 brown. Let me share in the chat box also, and I'll explain here. So this is an image. Basically, it's of pixels 28 cross 28. And what does the simply flattening means? We are all the 28 cross 28 means 784 pixels. We are stacking in this fashion. This is our input layer. So this simply flattening means. This is our image.
Sorry, like unrolling the two-dimensional image into a single.
Yeah, exactly. Unrolling the two-dimensional array into a one-dimensional array. Now you get it, I think. So let me define a very simple model.
Sir, what is the reshape -1 doing?
Reshape -1 is simply basically it understand. Let me show you intuitively so that you don't get confused. Yeah. So suppose this is the kind of tensor we are having. This I mean this is a 3 cross 2 cross 5. We are having 3 tensors, and both I mean all those are of 2 cross 5, 2 rows, 5 columns, and we are having similar 3 tensors. And let's suppose if I wanted to flatten all those things, I wanted to convert this multi-dimensional array into a single one-dimensional array. So while reshaping it, we can simply pass an argument like -1, and it simply basically tells the TensorFlow that whatever kind of calculation it fits, it does automatically. So whenever you pass an argument like -1, and if you will not pass I mean any other for example in this case we passed like 28 cross 28. If we do not pass it like that, then also it will perform this flattening operation like this. You can see all these tensors are being flattened in one-dimensional array. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like this. So this is essentially what -1 is doing. So let's define a very simple neural network architecture. And this we will come to this in the I mean the later stage. So what we will do, we will use the Keras library dot.
So sir, if 28 cross 28 was not there, then the reshaping will be different.
I mean we need this -1 basically essentially what is doing here is telling that we are having the model to consider all the 60,000 images, and those will be reshaped into 28 into 28 in the 784 neurons.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's define a very simple model which is having only the input layer and one output layer. So as I told you that we can define the model in the sequential and the functional using the sequential and functional API. So today we'll be defining the model using the sequential API. So while we are using the sequential API, we can define the model in two ways. One way is to simply stack all the layers together, and another way is to simply add the layers in the model itself. So first we'll see like how can we use this to stacking of the layers. So inside this sequential, we have to stack the layers into inside these brackets. So first layer is, let's suppose I am using first layer is keras dot, and dot layers basically tells that this is the input whatever giving it will be considered in a layered fashion. So for the input layer, I am using keras dot layer dot input layer, and I am passing the number of neurons which are in the input layer. And after that, after the comma, we are stacking another layer. Suppose I am using this time this output layer only. So what this is doing, this is if you will see this visually, what it is doing, this is our input layer which is having all the 784 neurons, and now I am not using these two hidden layers. I am simply connecting all those into this these 10 neurons. All those input layers are connected to all those 10 output layers. And so this is simply how we define a model. If we are having only input layer, one input layer and one an output layer, we are simply classifying the image into 10 categories. That is the meaning of this 10 neurons. And you must have learned about all the activation functions, etc. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we
So
can, yeah.
So you said that in sequential method,
Yeah.
we can't add something after. I mean, once it is created, right? It cannot be edited. The layers cannot be edited.
Yes.
Now we are only writing the input layer and the final output layer, which consists of I mean target variables, 10 target variables.
Yes.
Then how can we add the hidden layers for this again?
We will not be able to add the hidden layer is this in this model. We will define model in, I'm just explaining you, if we are not having the hidden layers, how a simpler model looks like. And when we will be adding the hidden layers, then we will be defining the model again, once again.
Okay, so
this is how a very simpler neural network model looks like. This is the input layer, and this is the our output layer. And we after that, what we need to do, we need to, if we wanted to print the model summary, how the model looks like, simply put model dot summary, and it will show you like this is how the model summary looks like. So there are total 784 neurons, and we are mapping all those 784 neurons into the 10 classes. So
sir,
next, yeah.
So excuse me. So here the parameters are 7850. So does it mean that the bias?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. You got it right. Simply, you know that when we are defining a model, it consists of the, the layers consist of the weights and biases. So it is considering the weights and the biases. So after that, what we need to do, we need to compile the model, and I am simply using.
Just a second.
Yes.
How did we arrive at 7850? Can you explain once?
Yeah. So 784 neurons. We are having 784 neurons in the input.
Yes, sir.
And if we take there will be same weight, and there will be the input neurons, these are all, you can consider them as a weight, and for every layer there is a one bias also, isn't it?
Sir, at each neuron there is a bias.
Yes.
Means not necessarily at each layer, means at each neuron there will be a bias unit, right?
That is for the hidden layers only, not for the.
Yes. So I mean, these are all the weights, and if you will add one bias value, so simply it will become 785, and those all will be mapped to, I mean, all the 10 outputs, so it will become 7850. And
Okay,
after
so those are the weight functions, means
yes,
for
yes,
each of those. Okay.
yeah. So after I mean, whatever I have talked till now, this is about the feed forward. I mean, I'm moving in the forward direction only. So what now in the next step, what we need to do after defining the model, we need to compile the model. And what does this compiling of the model means? I mean, what this is the model where we have defined all the weights and biases on all the values, and it basically reads to the output. And now what we need to do, we need to calculate the losses also. So for that we are using model.compile, and losses we are defining. What kind of losses we are using? Sparse, categorical, cross entropy. And I mean, there are multiple types of losses. You will be taught, I mean, if you haven't gone through all the losses in the class, then I mean, you must be going through that. And in terms of coding, first we are using this categorical cross entropy. You must have learned about this categorical cross entropy loss function.
No, sir.
So you have learned about this cross entropy when we are calculating the error from the predicted output and your actual output.
So we have learned about logistic regression.
No, I have not taught that yet. Next class I will teach them.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I mean, there are various kind of losses. So when we are having a model which consists of the kind of prediction, for example, when you are doing the classification type of task, and when you need to calculate the error, then you can use this cross entropy kind of loss function. So what is the term of meaning of this sparse? Simply means that if we are having only the two kind of classes, 0 and 1, then we have simply used like categorical cross entropy, because we are having the multiple classes here. That is why we are using sparse categorical cross entropy. And for the optimizer, basically it is used to optimize the weights and biases. So you must have learned about the gradient descent, and so you can use here gradient descent and batch gradient descent also, but I am using the Adam optimizer here. So you can simply define it keras.optimizers.adam, and you can define the learning rate. So basically what this thing is doing, this is basically essentially updating all your weight values. Like it will be simply updating the weight new is equals to weight old minus your learning rate times the derivative of error with respect to weights. So this thing will be doing that. And in order to measure the accuracy, we are defining a matrix called accuracy. So if we run this function, yeah.
So that loss variable there, that is basically dependent on the difference between the actual value and the predicted value. Like, is it related to that?
Yes, exactly.
So that is basically like the error, like how much is it deviating
I mean,
from?
when I'm talking about the cross entropy, you can consider it like a cost function. When we are I'm talking about the cost function, I'm talking about the whole in the calculation in terms of all the data points in the data set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir.
Yes.
So cross entropy is like the log loss function.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So I have defined a very simple model in which we are having only an input layer, and we are simply mapping all those inputs to the output layer. And let's train it, and let's look, I mean, what kind of accuracy our model is currently giving. So to train the model, we need to simply use model.fit function. And you need to pass the X train and Y train and the batch size, epochs, and verbose. And I'll explaining all these things. So basically X train, Y train, batch size is 32. So what does this batch size 32 mean? Anyone would like to tell me?
So 32 training examples are used to update the parameter once.
Yeah, basically, yeah, we are feeding the data for the training into the batch of 32. Simply, we were having 60,000 data set in the training.
Yes, sir.
So 60,000. If we'll take in the batch size of 32, so it will go for how many number of iterations? 1875. So simply it is this is that 1875. In the one epoch, all the data sets are fed into the batch size of 32 each. And what does this epoch mean?
So one epoch equals one
number of iterations.
Yeah, one epoch simply means we are iterating through whole the data set once. When we have gone through all the data, I mean all the data points in a data set once while training, that is considered as one epoch. And this verbose is equals to 2 is simply associated with the notation. For example, you can use verbose 0, 1 and 2. 0 will show nothing, and when you will use verbose is equals to 1, and if you will train, it will show like this. And if you will use verbose is equals to 2, it will simply print this epoch only. It will not show this.
Sir, can you once again explain the batch size? Like, how does it affect the iterations? 32 batch size.
So basically, I mean, do you get it? This 1875.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what I'm doing, I have prepared this model, and we are having 60,000 images as an input. Or you can consider it as, if it is confusing, you can consider as 60,000 data points we are considering as an input, and we are feeding to the model. So what defining the batch size simply means we are feeding the model 32 data points at at one step, and again 32. So it will go through all the data points into 1875 steps.
Sir, I have a doubt. Like,
yes, exactly. Ask.
So in epoch 1, so if we consider one batch, does the same batch occur in the second epoch, or it would be some random set of 32 in the second epoch value?
I mean, what will be happening in the first epoch? Let's suppose you have trained your model, and I must tell you that this batch size and epoch, these are all the hyperparameters which needed to be tuned as per the understanding of dataset. I mean, what kind of dataset or what kind of domain, the kind of domain the dataset consists of you using, that depends on the how many number of epochs you wanted to train your model to, and what is the optimum batch size you wanted to use. So these are all hyperparameters, they can be tuned. And now coming to your question, when I am talking about one epoch, that simply means my all the weights and biases of all those data points are trained once and saved, and again in the second epoch they will be trained again, and all the iterations will be performed, like loss will be calculated, the weights and biases will again be optimized, and in the subsequent third epoch this will happen again. So I am training my whole data points for the 5 number of times, whole data set.
So after every epoch it will start from scratch again, so in calculating weights and bias, etc.
No, after the first epoch those weights and biases will be saved, and in the next epoch it will start from where the updated weights and biases on values only.
Yes, sir, got it, sir. That's why accuracy is increasing after every
yes epoch. Yes, exactly, you got it right. So if you wanted to check how this looks like, weights learned and biases learned, you can simply print them here. Okay. So these are, I mean, this is how your learned weights and biases looks like. Okay, this. So what I did till now, I have just trained this model for 5 number of epochs, and what I defined, I just used a very simple, I mean, neural network in which I am having only one input layer, and I am mapping all those inputs to the outputs. Those are, I mean, the 10 then 10 outputs. So next, what I will do, I will increase the number of layer in order to increase the accuracy. Let's see. We are getting the accuracy of 93.08, and that is the training accuracy, not the testing accuracy. And let's say if you wanted to test your model and what kind of accuracy it is giving. So let's see how much accuracy it is giving when we test the data. So this is the test data. Test data is the data which is not seen by the model. When we are training the model, then the test set, the test data is kept, I mean, separate while training. So we will calculate the accuracy in the unseen data, that is the test data, and you can see that the accuracy on the test data is 92.74. And that in the training data, that accuracy was 93.08. So
Sir, what is the 313 by 313?
I mean, this is same thing. You are having 10,000 samples for the test, and again the batch size is 32.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Now what we can do in order to increase the accuracy and define the complete deep neural network. What does the deep means in a neural network? Then that simply means that you are using more number of hidden layers. You have started to use number of hidden layers. So how can we define the number of hidden layers? We can simply define the hidden layers in this fashion also. So what I'm doing this time, I'm defining a function, the Python function, which is used to create a model, and simply it will return our complete model. So defining a function, my model fully connected. So in this sequential form, what I am doing. Okay, now let me explain you this using another sequential method. So let me define a model again. Model 1 is equals to keras dot. Now what I will do, I will add each layer using model 1 dot add, and now I'll add each layer. Is another form by which you can define your model in the sequential API. Now what I am doing, I am mapping our input neurons, those are 784, into the first hidden layer neurons. Those are the, I mean, in the first hidden layer, I want it to be of 512 neurons. And as you know that in the hidden layer, we have to use an activation function. So we are using an activation function as ReLU, and we can name our layers also. So I am naming it as our first layer. Or
excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, why are we not putting input layer as 784,1?
784 comma, I mean, it essentially mean the same thing. What you want to tell the model, like we are the model is expecting the input as 784 neurons in the flattened form. Can you please excuse me for 1 minute? Yeah, sorry. I was having some difficulty while speaking. So where were we?
Sir, you were answering a doubt, like why we don't use 780.
Yeah. Essentially, this will mean the same thing only. What we want our model to tell that it should accept the 784 neurons as an input, as an one-dimensional array. So essentially, it would mean the same thing. You can try it. In your end by doing that, and you can see like what kind of architecture it is creating. So model 1 dot add. Now what I'm doing, I have just added one layer, one hidden layer of 512 neurons. Now I am adding another dense layer of 256 neurons like this. I have added another layer, and after that model 1 dot add, we can add this final output layer, layers dot dense, and we are mapping this into 10 classes and using an activation as softmax. And first hidden layer, second hidden layer, this is the output layer. So now what does this dense means? Anyone?
The number of neurons in that layer.
So let me show you visually what does the dense means. Simply dense means like we are this is our hidden layer 1, this is our hidden layer 2. So simply dense means we are connecting all the inputs in to all the neurons. All the input neurons will be connected to all the output neurons. That is basically simply dense is doing. It is essentially connecting all the input neurons to all the output neurons. So it will be happening in each layer. So this is yeah.
So like we first define the layer, right? Like it doesn't know like there is another layer afterwards. Then how does it know? How does it connect them? Like after defining the first hidden layer, we are defining the second hidden layer.
Yes. So when you define, that is when the model will understand that there is one another layer to connect.
Okay.
So now this is another type of sequential representation in the Keras. So what we can do, model 1 dot, we can print the summary.
Sir, so that like writing the order of those statements is also important, right? Like if we exchange the 10 and 256.
Yes. It's actually important. What you want to do, you actually when you are defining your neural network, essentially you are knowing that what kind of neural network I want to define, what are the number of neurons in the output, what we are expecting. Let's suppose you define this layer instead of this. So what it will be doing, these all 512 neurons will be mapped to these 10 neurons only, and again these 10 neurons will be mapped to 256 neurons. So in the output you will be having the 256 classifications. So it's order of definition is essentially important, and this the number of neurons 512 to 56, and these are the again hyperparameters. The number of neurons in the hidden layer again are the hyperparameters. You can change this as per the need of your model. So now this is what we are doing. We are mapping all the inputs to first 512 neurons, then the parameters will become this, and again these 512 will be mapped to those 256. So again the parameters will become that much, and again these 256 will be mapped to all the 10 output neurons. Again the parameter will become like this. So you got the idea, like how can you represent the sequential model in both the ways. right or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I'll just simply give a basic idea. I was talking about the sequential and functional API. So when the functional API becomes important, let's suppose this is not the flexibility in the sequential API. Like if you wanted to use, I mean, connect this layer with another previous layer. I mean, you cannot go backward in this. So that is the flexibility with the functional API, but I'll not go to that right now because that is for the I mean more complex neural networks. So again, we can do the same thing. We have defined the model, and again we can compile the model, and we can run the model and see how much improvement we are having in the accuracy. Again, we are compiling the model using the loss function and the optimizer and the accuracy.
Sir?
Yeah.
So here can we branch the layers, sir? Like let us say there are 4 layers, and then from the second layer I want to have 2 different outputs based on the number of neurons.
Yeah, if you wanted to define that kind of model, then you have to use the functional API. If you wanted to define that kind of model, then sequential API will not work. So to define that kind of model, you essentially need to use this functional kind of API. So again, you can go to this TensorFlow website, and in the tutorial section, you can find this functional API. I mean, it's not very tough. It's very I mean, it's easy to understand. It's like same thing. What in the functional API, what you need to do, you need to pass the previous layer after the next layer is defined. For example, you have defined this layer. After if you are defining it using functional API, then you need to pass this previous layer as an input to this layer. That is the only difference.
Okay.
So can you please explain what Pawan Kumar said? I mean, the question which he asked, like which architecture he was specifying.
Okay, but I would suggest let's not go to that because that is I mean the complex kind of neural network.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I mean in the later stage you will come to that kind of architecture. I'm sure.
Okay, sir.
So now we have defined the model again using 2 hidden layers, hidden layer 1 and hidden layer 2. And I have told you about all this, what does dense does, what is this 512 activations, etc. Now let's compile the model. Again, we are compiling the model using this loss function and optimizer. And let's fit the model and check how much accurate it is. So now the model starts training. Oh, sorry, I need to fit model 1. I have fitted the previous model. That is why all the things are same. While this is training, let me come to this. I mean, do I need to explain this or you guys understood it?
No, sir.
Understood.
Yeah, it is simply the same model essentially defined inside a Python function only.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, when would non-trainable parameters be non-zero?
I mean, this will happen when you will be dealing with the CNN kind of architecture, or this can happen in this also when you will be using the batch normalization and the dropout kind of thing, and that will be covered, I think, in the next lab.
Okay.
So now you can see that we have fitted this the model 1 architecture, which I defined using these dense layers, the hidden layers. So now you can see that accuracy has increased. The training accuracy and the test accuracy, both the accuracy has increased. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So now, I mean, are you guys able to relate like what the hidden layers are doing?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. So, sir, are you there? I mean, I have to cover in this lab till this topic only. In the next topic, what we need to ask is to cover only this part, the batch normalization and this regularization. Are these topics are covered in the theoretical classes, regularization and batch normalization?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Oh, yeah, that is why I think they will be covered in this week or in the next lab or the next week. And in the next lab, this will be taken as the coding, convolution neural network, and this batch normalization thing and the regularization thing. Basically, essentially, it is doing a kind of, you can say that, what should I say? Data manipulation kind of thing. Basically, in the dropout, what will happen? It will essentially drop all those data points which are not important. And similar thing will happen in the batch normalization also. So batch normalization, as the word suggests, like we will be normalizing the value, but in the batches. So I think all these things will be covered first theoretically, then these will be covered in the practical sessions.
Sir?
Yeah.
So we can change the number of neurons in the hidden layer. Like it does
Yeah,
not need to
obviously.
be fixed, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what we can do, you can see that we are having an accuracy of 98.04%. Let's suppose you were supposed to get an accuracy of you are asked to get an accuracy of 97% only. The project you are assigned, and you are asked that if you are getting a 97% accuracy or something like that, that is enough. So again, you can simply tune these hyperparameters, like number of neurons in the hidden layer and number of in the hidden layer. So the less number of neurons essentially means that there are less number of computations, and those will required. Those will compute fast and requires less computation power. So I think this is what I was having for today's tutorial. The sir must have shared the problem with you guys. The assignment 2 problem.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can start doing that problem if any one of you having doubt.
No. For
Yes.
today's lab, no, I have not shared. So yeah.
Okay, sir. So,
Okay.
sir, I have explained, the model building of deep neural network, and because the dropout and batch normalization thing are not covered, so should I explain it or in the next lab?
I think what you can do, because so you are prepared on that, right? You have materials to prepare that.
Yeah. I have all the material.
Okay, so one thing that you could do, because you have time, so you can tell them, so that things become easy when I will talk. So
okay, sir. Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Easy for them. Yeah, I think you can cover that.
Okay, sir. I'll do that.
So,
yeah.
I have a doubt, like how in background these mappings are done.
So let me show you the tutorial. You will get a very fair idea like how these things are done in the background. Are you able to see that? How the calculations are happening? How the data is transferred from one layer to another layer?
Yes, but how is it determining that which part to follow and?
So basically, what is happening in the each hidden layer? This the hidden layer learns that like that. This suppose this is the 9. And in the hidden layer 1, what the neurons are essentially doing, they the each and every neuron is learning different thing. So suppose the one neuron learns this thing, another neuron learns this thing. For suppose for the in the case of 4, the neurons will be learning in the I mean specific sections will be learned. So this is how essentially the learning happens. I mean, do you want to ask in terms of calculations, like how will the calculations will be happening?
How it's functioning in the first, I know that we have various layer. The
Yeah.
first layer, the input layer, consists of the pixel and the intensity.
Yeah.
And how is it getting passed on and boiled down to 10 only output layer, 10 numbers, that is, it is 1, 2, 3, 4.
I mean, within the same fashion. I mean, what happens in the first layer, that will happen in this layer also. So what is happening, like all the 256 neurons are mapped to these 10 neurons. They will be connected like that. Let's suppose these are 256 neurons. And these are 10 output neurons. So what will be happening, like I mean, are you clear till this point that each neurons will be having some value which will be computed from here and here?
I mean, how those neurons are getting some values?
Okay, I mean, these neurons are getting some values using mathematical functions. So let me explain you what will be happening.
Animesh, I think I can take this question.
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay, so what's your name? You're asking a question.
Amrita.
Amrita. So did you attend my last lecture?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now if you attend that, then what happens is that now in this particular example, so you are giving one image. Okay, for simplicity, you can take the batches also, but you are giving one image means the pixel values. Okay, you have 784 pixel values you are giving in the input layer.
Yes.
Okay. Then you have the weights and biases, right? For all the connections and for all the neurons. They are essentially the parameters of this model which you learn from this data using the technical backpropagation.
Yes.
Okay. Now what happens that once you have that weights and biases, then you simply, for every neuron, okay, you use the formula through which you can compute the input value to this neuron. You have the formula. I explained that formula. It's basically weighted sum of the these values that you are getting from the previous layer. Okay. So that's your input. Okay. And you apply the activation function, whatever activation function you use on the input, you are going to get one value which is called the activation value of this neuron. You are getting some values from the first layer. You basically pass this value to the second layer. Same computation you will do it, and that way you can simply going to get the final value in the output layer.
Okay, so based on the activation value, each neuron is getting activated and the value is getting
exactly. And you are passing along this value to the next layer.
Okay, I get it.
This is how. And the training is done because initially you do not know all these weights and biases. So when you train it, that means it is actually trying to optimize these parameters so that your actual level matches the predicted level, and which I think I explained in the last lecture how you do that.
Okay, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sir, how is the error calculated?
Sorry, what?
Pixels, right? How is the error calculated? That these are all pixels, right?
So, but you are taking the pixels. Okay, so the input layer you are taking the pixel values. You have 78 for pixels. Every pixel has a numerical value. It's just numerical quantity you are taking. Okay, so you are giving actually numerics a vector of 784 dimension. Okay, it's a real vector, real numbers. Okay.
Sir, I understood that part, sir. I'm asking how will you calculate error? Let's say there is a number which is supposed to be read as 4, but it got read as 9, or it got read as 8. How will you calculate the error in this case?
You can so Animesh, which error function you are taking in this case?
Sir, I am using the cross entropy.
Yeah, but, so he is taking cross entropy. There are lots of error functions.
Yeah.
He is taking cross entropy, which I have not taught, which I will teach next. But for simplicity, I taught the squared error, right? So squared error means that the deviation between what is actually predicted and what it is there in the original level, just the square difference. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So for example, if your actual number is 9 and your network is predicting 4, then the difference will be, because these are 9 and 4, so like you can convert this 9 into one hot vector. Okay, that means the 9 components, so it's a 10-dimensional vector because there are 10 possible digits. So the 9th cell will be 1, all else cell will be 0. Okay, that's for the actual level. And because your network is predicting say 4, then only the 4th cell will be 1, others will be 0. So it's basically you are comparing two vectors. And that's the difference between the two vectors is the error that you are having here in this case.
Sir, but the difference between 4 and 8 and 4 and 9, they're still the same.
Yeah, so that is not a problem in this case. I mean,
Sir,
your
like
problem
4
whether
and
your
9
model is
can
correctly predicting or
easily be
not.
mistaken, sir. Sir, like
It
let's say
doesn't
a
really
model
matter whether you are predicting like 4 and 8 or 4 and 9. What is important is that your model is predicting wrongly. That's the most important thing.
Yes, sir. But let's say the model is predicting number. Number should be 9. The model is predicting. So the model is predicting 4, and the model is predicting 8. Okay. Now, if you see pictorially, 4 looks more closer to 9 than 8, right?
Okay, in that way, it is not the way that the machine learning is actually working. In this, why you were saying that 4 is closer to 9 and things like that? It's the classification problem. It's a classification problem. In classification, it doesn't bear any meaning. I mean, 4, whether it's 8 or 4, it's in grading.
So every difference is an error.
Every difference is an error, yes, in this case. Because it's a classification problem. It's a classification problem. In a regression problem, you probably have 8 and 4 was a big deal. But in a classification problem, you simply want to know whether you are predicting correctly or not wrongly. That's it.
Oh, yes, sir. I understood.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Animex, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is no doubt till here, I think, how we define the model using both the ways and how we train that. And yeah. So what we can do sometimes, we overfit our model. Let's see in this case also. Suppose in the same case, if I was training our model for the more number of epochs, let's say I train our model for the 10 number of epochs or 20 number of epochs randomly. Let's suppose I am getting an accuracy of 99.9%. So essentially what is happening in this case, like my model is able to learn, I mean, all the things very accurately. So this leads to a kind of overfitting of data, and we do not require the overfitting in our model or the underfitting. So we essentially need a just fit data set, not overfit or not the underfit. So in order to avoid the overfitting kind of situations, what we do, we use the dropout layers in our model. So what dropout does, basically what happens in dropout, let's suppose if you are using a dropout layer, and after in the hidden layer you are using a dropout layer like df.keras.layers.dropout 0.2. So it will essentially randomly will drop 20% of the neurons, and the neurons will be dropped in a manner which are considered not as important according to the algorithm. So that happens in the dropout layer, and let me add the dropout layers to the model now.
Sir, what is meant by not important here?
I mean, not important simply means when you are doing the classification kind of thing. So what essentially is learned in each the neurons when it is predicting the output. Like suppose this is the 9. So this is all mapped to the 0 to 9. So what is this 0 predicting? That it will be predicting a probability of this output. Probability of this output like 0.001, 0.001, 0.002, and in the 9 it will be saying that 0.998, like 98%, it's a 9 number only. So all the neurons which are connected with this 9 are having more significantly good, more important values in their neurons, respective neurons. But all the neurons connected with this 0 and all the weights and biases are which are associated with this 0, does not hold as much importance as the weights and biases which are associated with this 9 holds.
Sir, but all the numbers are connected to all the neurons, right?
Yes, but all the numbers are essentially connected with all the neurons. But do you understand, like all the numbers which are connected to all the neurons will be having their different weights and biases?
Yes.
Yeah. So that simply clears your doubt.
Sir, does dropping out use the CNN algorithm or any specific? Any special algorithm is used to drop out?
No. You can simply drop the features in this also. What we have defined. I am just going to explain in this only, because I think CNN is not covered till now.
So we got, sir explained CNN in case of classification.
Okay.
Not in.
Then.
Okay, no. There's a confusion. So I think CNN that you are referring to in this case, CNN from deep learning.
Yes, sir. Yes.
But this CNN, that CNN is called condensed nearest neighbor. This is not the CNN convolutional neural network. They are not equivalent things. Okay.
Oh,
okay, sir.
So condensed nearest neighbor is a different thing, but this is a neural network thing. Okay.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, and this is dropout is a generic approach which can be applied on all kinds of neural network. Okay. So feed forward, CNN, RNN, whatever.
Okay, let me apply a dropout layer and let's see what happens to our model. Model1 dot add layers dropout 0.5. And now I run this model, and this was just to explain you. Model.summary. So after adding this dropout layer, what essentially I am doing, I am asking our neural network to drop the 50% of the neurons randomly, and which are considered as less important by the model itself. So after this dense layer, I am adding a dropout layer. So this is how the parameters now looks like. And now let's train and let's see what effect it has on the accuracy and other things. So now can anyone explain me what happened? What difference you are noticing when we added one dropout layer and we essentially dropped 50% of the neurons in the hidden layer 2?
So accuracy is decreased.
Accuracy is decreasing.
Accuracy is not decreased that much. That we were in the training data, we were getting the 98 point something, and yeah, here is decreased very slightly. So what will be your conclusion?
Time of calculation has reduced a lot.
Yeah, time of calculation definitely had reduced, but I mean, you can see that we have dropped like 50% of the neurons in the hidden layer, and again it's giving the accuracy nearly the same as previous model, isn't it?
For fitting, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, so your model is basically after dropping the neurons from the hidden layer, using the dropout, the accuracy of your model is not getting compromised that much. I mean, it's a very slightly different, not in a very large scale. So I mean, you can say that the neurons whichever are dropped, that was not as important in order to predict the numbers, isn't it? I mean, if the yeah.
So that is some random dropping of neurons, like.
Yes, exactly.
Sir, are the neurons of the only previous layer dropped or all the layers before the dropout layer?
I mean, whenever you are using the dropout, so if you are using the dropout, let's say in this, so what will be happening? We will be dropping the random neurons. So all the neurons will be dropped which are connected to those neurons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you explain again which neurons will be dropped?
Okay. So let's say I have used this dropout layer after this dense layer. After this, I mean, in this hidden layer 2, I am using a dropout of 0.5. That is, I want to drop the 50% of the neurons from here. So let's suppose this, if this neuron is dropped, this, where my cursor is, this particular neuron is dropped. So what will happen? I mean, the neurons from the calculations which are associated with this neurons, I mean, the connections of this neurons from the previous will be disconnected simply. All the connections of this neurons from this layer and from this layer will be disconnected.
Okay, so neurons only from the just the previous layer will be dropped.
Yes, exactly.
Sir, so the number of parameters should also be reduced?
Yes, yes. As you have seen that number of parameters has already been reduced. So this basically happens. Now you can, are you able to visualize what is happening after the dropout?
Sir, like in the code, like what does it mean, like dropout? Like will it make the weights and biases zero, or like how does it remove the connection?
I mean, it simply removes the connection. Then what is the meaning of weights and biases? If there is no connection, there is no weight.
Yes, sir. Like I mean, we can say connection, but in the code, like how does it get implemented? Like removing the connection.
Yeah, it will simply, I mean, it will simply drop the connection. That means, I mean, you can see this visualization, right? When it is connected to all those neurons, I mean, all of these connections are having some weights or not?
But here it is dropping neurons from all the previous layers, not just the previous layer.
I mean, this is just an intuition, like how the dropout occurs. This is not the, yeah.
So in TensorFlow dropout, is neurons dropped only from the previous layer, the one previous layer, or from all previous layers?
I mean, all the connections which are associated with that layer will be dropped.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, yeah.
Sir, after every, I mean, in every epoch, does the dropped neurons will differ, or the same neurons are dropped in every epoch?
I mean, once you start feeding the model, the when it will come to the dropout, I mean, when it will come to the dropout, the neurons will be dropped at the first stage only, and it will simply, I mean, it will train only those whoever are left.
Okay, yes, I got it.
Yeah. So I think that that is pretty much what I wanted to cover in today's lab.
Sir, then after dropping, the training accuracy will go down, right?
I mean, it works like that. The accuracy will suffer, but it will not suffer that the accuracy will suffer, because what we are essentially doing when we was not using dropout, we are basically overfitting the model. I mean, it was able to learn all the parameters, so training accuracy will definitely suffer. And when the training accuracy will suffer, when I'm using the training accuracy will suffer, I does not mean that it will not train with a very good accuracy. So it will train to the right fit only. It will not overfit the model. So when you will predict the model in the test data, so it will, because essentially what it is doing while predicting or evaluation of the model, it is using the weights and biases from the fitted model to the model which is trained on the training data. So whatever accuracy is affecting the training model, that should reflect on the test model also. That is the essentially same thing.
Okay, sir. And sir, also the parameter for the dropout is that also hyperparameter, like?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the neural network, whatever you are defining by yourself, you can consider all those things as hyperparameter.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Sir, are you there? So I think I have covered pretty much what I was having for today's lab session.
Sir, can you share these files?
Yeah. This file will be shared in the Teams only.
And can we leave now?
Yeah, I think
yes,
you can leave.
Yes, you can leave. You can leave. So I'm giving you this, sending you this problem statement, assignment statement. So you can leave now. Anyways, please share this notebook with them.
Yes, sir. I'll
Thank
just
you,
upload
sir.
this.
Sir, and where to upload that today's lab assignment, lab practice problem?
Sorry? No, I said that everything that I will be giving, this will go as an assignment. Okay. So just one continuation of assignment. So just I already created 2 channels for first 2 assignments in Moodle. I'm going to create third one. You just upload there through Moodle.
Okay, like this. No, I'm asking, like, this problem will be the third assignment, whatever you're giving.
Yeah, exactly. Third assignment. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah. So dropout and other things I will cover in the next lecture. So this kind of like, you can refresh your memory a little bit then. So okay, so